The rape crisis movement has largely been encouraged along in response to the act of rape itself, but also in response to the dominant rape culture in which we live. Rape culture encompasses a great deal of social behaviors that are seen even today. Myths perpetuated by rape culture include the idea that rape is always done by a stranger, when this only accounts for 13% of all rapes, that women are likely to be lying when they report rape, despite only 2 to 8% reported rapes being found false, and that women are the only ones that can be raped and usually bring it upon themselves through dress and drunken behavior. The issue of consent has been widely debated in today's culture, but the rape crisis movement characterizes it as freely given without threat of harm or repercussions otherwise, the definite yes rather than the absence of no, and that those who are underage or under the influence of drugs or alcohol cannot legally give consent. Crisis centers advise those who come into contact with a victim of rape to be understanding and above all validating of their experiences. One must be loving and supportive in light of the various effects rape has upon its victims, such as eating or sleeping disorders, PTSD, suicidal thoughts, and countless others. You must be prepared to listen and to provide help where needed, such as seeking out professional assistance. Some of the earliest efforts to create organizations that provided resources and awareness of issues regarding rape were initiated in the 1970s by mostly African American women. Women such as Ida B. Wells became leaders in this movement, and it gained traction alongside the civil rights movements of the day. The first actual rape crisis centers made their hubs in Berkeley, Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. In 1978, self-defense classes began to be offered by rape crisis centers, creating empowering and proactive rape support and prevention. Currently, rape crisis centers are gaining support, allowing them to grow from grassroots interventions into more efficient operations. One woman in Toledo founded an organization for rape victims from her home in 1972. This organization was one of the first to gain recognition by law enforcement, allowing women to be funneled from the criminal justice system into her grassroots organization. Crisis centers also now connect with other similar organizations, such as domestic violence programs. The Washington, D.C. Rape Crisis Center was the first to create a crisis line for victims that allowed them to get immediate support and assistance from trained professionals. All of these innovations in the care of rape victims have helped women to gain the support they need after sexual assaults. As of 1979, there were more than 1,000 rape crisis centers across the U.S., and that number has only continued to grow over time. The rape crisis movement, like so many others within the blanket category of feminism, has struggled with the issue of intersectionality. Though the movement was originally started by African American women like Ida B. Wells, the more white women got a hold of and began to participate in the movement, the fewer and fewer voices we heard from women of color. Second wave feminism, taking place generally from the 1960s to the 1990s, gained traction right alongside the civil rights movement. Yet the core doctrine of latter of equally important for all women instead of white women was unfortunately ignored. As the years have passed, and as this movement carries on still, the opinions and perspectives of women of color are slowly returning, and the movement must continue to expand upon its threshold for their views. Ida B. Wells was an African-American journalist and activist. She led an anti-lynching crusade in the United States in the 1990s. She founded groups and became important in others that worked for African-American justice. Her turning point to become such a devoted activist was after a train ride where she bought a first-class ticket, she was ordered to be removed and moved to the African American car. After this event, she became a writer and a journalist in which she wrote about issues like race, politics, injustice, using the moniker Lola. She established several civil rights organizations. Her actions worked towards the Black Women's Club and later the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. The very groundwork of our movement was laid by her and women like her. She worked on behalf of all women. She associated herself with the National Equal Rights League. She founded the first African American kindergarten in her community and fought for women's suffrage. She was a heroine. Over the course of the rape crisis movement, a number of legislative measures have been taken to combat the effects of rape culture. One of the measures that surfaced was the passage of rape shield laws, which limited the admissibility of a rape victim's sexual history during the course of her trial against her rapist. First surfacing in Michigan in 1974, every state now has its own version of these laws, as well as versions at a national level called the Federal Rule of Evidence 41. These laws were meant not only to eliminate bias during trial, but also to encourage victims to come forward about their trauma. The handling of marital rape has also changed as a result of the rape crisis movement. Laura X, a prominent leader in this section of the movement, founded the National Clearinghouse on Marital Rape in California in 1978 and spearheaded the campaign in California in 1979 to make spousal rape a crime. In 1976, Nebraska was the first state to criminalize marital rape, but as of July 1993, all states have deemed it a crime, with methods of punishment and execution of legal procedures varying from state to state. Another triumph was a federal law passed in 1994 called the Violence Against Women Act, which was intended to improve investigation and prosecution of rape, domestic violence, and a myriad of other issues, though providing federal grant funding for organizations as legal aid groups and the very rape crisis centers that bear our movement's name.